Hello and welcome to Let's Bark About It. I'm your host today, Dr. Calli Thompson from the Northwestern Veterinary Hospital. And our guest today is Dr. Ken Deacon. Ken, welcome to the program.
Hi, Calli. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks for joining us. So Ken, why don't you start by introducing yourself a little bit. You work right now for the Thunder Bay District Health Unit, is that right?
I consult for them. I'm not full-time.
Okay.
I just do this as a part-time basis. And I'm working on monitoring the vector-borne program.
Okay.
And in doing that, we're trying to find organisms that transmit diseases. That's what a vector is.
Okay.
One organism that moves the disease from one area to another area. And we're looking primarily, I started there when West Nile came on the scene, West Nile virus transmitted by mosquitoes. But that's pretty much a non-issue in Thunder Bay. There's very little risk of acquiring West Nile here. However, we have had one confirmed West Nile case in the Thunder Bay district in the 15 years that we've been monitoring for the disease.
Okay.
And he just turned up when he went to donate blood.
Oh,
And so,
interesting.
Yeah, it was really interesting. The other one, the one that we're talking about today, is ticks. And
Right.
when I started consulting with the health unit back in 2003, I'd never seen a tick in Thunder Bay.
I don't think a lot of people had.
No.
Yeah.
And that year there were three ticks that were submitted to the health unit. And now we get about 1,000 a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
So without question, ticks are in Thunder Bay and
Ticks are definitely in Thunder Bay.
increasing numbers.
And they're increasing in number as well.
Okay. Why don't we start by talking a little bit about the ticks themselves? So what types of ticks will we see in Thunder Bay?
Well, it's really interesting because we have one main type of tick, which is the wood tick or the American dog tick. And that's the most abundant that we get in the course of a year. So if we get 1,000 ticks in, most likely 900 of those will be that. And that's what people find on their dog most prominently. And they're really easily identified because if you look at them, if they have any mottling of white on the body,
Okay.
it's this tick, and this tick doesn't transmit anything in this
Okay.
area.
So they're creepy crawly, but
they
we
suck
don't
blood.
have to worry about disease transmission
right.
with that type of tick.
Now there's another tick, which is the black-legged tick, which is commonly known as the deer tick.
Okay.
But black-legged tick describes it perfectly because this tick has black legs and there's no white on it at all.
Okay.
The female has a black shield on her back, and the body can be sort of maybe a browny red, but there's no white at all. And they're generally smaller than, the full-grown tick is, the black-legged tick is smaller than the wood tick, but size is really a really stupid characteristic to use with these things because they all start off small.
Right.
The eggs are almost invisible.
Okay.
And but the amazing thing is they only go through 3 life stages
Okay.
to become mature and to be able to lay eggs. And perhaps most people, anyone who's been in contact with a tick has probably tried to kill it with their fingers, and they don't kill very easily. They're very elastic.
Okay.
They have to be elastic. The body is able to stretch because in those 3 life stages, they only have 3 meals.
Wow.
So they get on you, they extract your blood, they blow themselves up to a huge size, drop off, and the entire life cycle for the black-legged tick is pretty amazing. It takes them 3 years to go through that 2-year life cycle.
So 3 years.
Or 3 years to go through, 2 years to go through those 3 stages of development. So the eggs are laid during the early summer. They hatch, and then the larval stage, the first stage, takes that entire season to find a host, usually something like a mouse, because they're pretty minuscule. And then they blood feed. The following spring, they'll, or even during the autumn, they'll molt into the second stage, which is called the nymphal stage. That'll overwinter. The nymphal stage will take a blood meal the second summer, stretch, and then begin to transform into the adult stage either during the autumn of the second year, but they are not going to be reproductive at this time.
Okay.
Or the following spring. And then what we actually have around here, which is really interesting, is it's called a bimodal distribution as far as abundance is concerned.
Okay.
Where the adult ticks, the adult black-legged ticks, are really abundant during April through to the end of June. And then it's like there's nobody around. But as I already said, the nymphal stage is present and
Right.
taking blood meals. And then because the nymphal stage can start molting into the adult stage in the autumn, then you have another abundance of adults.
And sorry, you said that was called again?
Bimodal
Bimodal
distribution.
distribution.
So,
So kind
one
of
peak
two peaks.
and then two peaks. And people think the wood tick is different, where it's totally abundant through June, July, and into August,
Okay.
and then it just disappears. But the black-legged tick, as I said, has these two peaks. The interesting thing about the disease, because I'll talk about Lyme disease a little bit here, is that when the tick is born, it's disease-free.
So it's not born with Lyme disease?
No, and it can't
Okay.
be born. That's called transovarial transmission of the
yeah.
disease. So the little ticks are clean. The real culprit in Lyme disease is the mice.
Interesting.
It's the white-footed deer mouse.
Wow.
They are the reservoir, that is to say, they're the hot spot. That's where the disease is found. So that the larval stage bites a mouse, acquires Lyme disease, and then it has it for the rest of its life. So the critical time when people are really not expecting to get Lyme is July, August, when that larval stage has turned into the nymphal stage. If it has Lyme disease, then that's the one that you really have to find. And people are unaware of the fact that they're super abundant in
Yeah.
July and August.
In that time of year.
And that
Yep.
and it's pretty well documented that most cases of Lyme disease come from the nymphal stage, which is tiny.
And very difficult to find.
We recommend to everybody to do a tick check when they're out, and everybody looks over their dogs. But there's a different search image that you should be looking for. With this thing is more, the nymphal stage is more, it's not the size of a lentil, which is what the adult stage will get to, or even the size of a pea when it's fully engorged, full of blood. They're more like a sesame seed, I
Wow.
suppose. They're
And that
that
would be
small.
very difficult on a human or a dog
That's right.
to find.
That's right.
Right.
And so therefore, people have to be very vigilant during the time when they think they're safe.
Right.
And I mean, that's information that has to get out there.
Right,
to-
educate people
yeah,
and pet owners.
right.
So let's take a little step back for a second. We've outlined the two types of ticks that we find in Thunder Bay. What we'd like to call the wood tick, and then more commonly known as the deer tick, which is the one we're worried about.
Yeah, black-legged tick.
So the disease transmission risk here comes from that
Yes.
black-legged tick.
Yeah.
And what diseases is that tick able to transmit, or that we're aware of in this area?
We know we've had ticks that were submitted, the black-legged ticks that were submitted to us. We've sent them to the National Microbiology Lab, and they've tested positive for Lyme disease.
Okay.
So we can get Lyme disease
Okay.
in the Thunder Bay district. The good news is that, as I said, the abundance of black-legged tick is really low within the tick community here. And of the black-legged ticks that we submit, less than 10% of those have Lyme disease.
Test positive.
So low number of black-legged ticks to begin with, and an even smaller number that have Lyme disease.
Which is
But that's changing.
right.
The reality is, if they weren't here 15 years ago, what's happened? And what's happened is the climate has changed.
Right.
And I just read a really interesting article about the Environmental Protection Agency in the States is now using the occurrence of Lyme disease as one of the indicators of climate change.
Wow, that's incredible.
It's really, and they've got some really interesting maps where the disease originated, was first identified. I mean, it's been present in North America for millennia, probably, back when the Earth was cooling. The ticks were really isolated to the northeast section of North America. And then, well, as I said, the first wood tick that I saw here was in 2003. The first black-legged tick was here 2005, something like that. And what's happened is the winters have been milder. Sometimes we have harsh winters, and then we have fewer ticks the following year. The really interesting thing about ticks is that even though they are wingless, they can fly.
Right.
There's no place in the world that is safe from Lyme disease. They've actually found Lyme disease in Australia, and we have a hard time with MDs here in Thunder Bay, convincing them that you should be screening your patients for Lyme disease. It should be one of your checklists. If all of these other things don't fit, then think about Lyme disease, because the sooner you treat it, the better off the patient is. But in Australia, the doctors are like, well, it's absolutely impossible, it can't be here. But there have been cases of Lyme disease in Australia, and that's because the ticks hitchhike on migratory birds.
Right.
Yeah.
They get a friend.
They get a friend.
Bring them on over.
And they suck the blood out of their friend, and then they drop off, and if they happen to have Lyme disease and they can survive, then the next thing they bite gets Lyme disease.
Right. Yeah. So how do we monitor what ticks are in? How do you monitor that as a district health unit? What ticks are in Thunder Bay and where they are in our region?
Okay. Right now, our greatest success is through something called passive surveillance.
Okay.
Where humans who have had ticks on them, or humans who have pets that have had ticks on them, are encouraged to bring those ticks into the health unit. And you can do that in the district as well. Just bring them into your local branch, and then they'll send them to Thunder Bay.
Okay.
And then when they arrive in Thunder Bay, I identify them, and if it's a black-legged tick, then we send it to the National Microbiology Lab, and they will screen it for diseases.
Okay.
And so that's passive surveillance, and that's where we get a tremendous amount of our data from. We have an interesting map which shows where ticks have been found where the black-legged ticks have been found in Thunder Bay. And I doubt very much if it's really a valid indication of their distribution. I think it's more an indication of where people take their dogs for walks, because the area around Boulevard Lake is, blistering red. It's called the heat map.
Okay.
And 25th Side Road, where there's another dog walking location, another really hot spot. So
they could be in more areas. It's just we're not necessarily venturing actively into those areas with our pets to pick them up and then be able to discover them.
Yeah.
Okay.
One of the things in this article that I mentioned earlier that I found interesting, the question is, why are the ticks on the move now? And it's because we've been fragmenting forest. And in fragmenting forest, it means that you wind up with fewer predators like fox, lynx, coyote, these sorts of things, that eat the deer mice.
Oh, okay.
And so there's an increase in the deer mouse population, which means that there's an increased probability. The first stage of the tick is so tiny. If it doesn't find something, it's definitely all over. So, but if the host is present, then they've got a better chance for survival.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Ken, we're going to take a break for a moment.
Okay.
And we'll be right back with our next segment. Welcome back to our second segment of Let's Bark About It. Again, our guest today is Dr. Ken Deacon Thanks again, Ken, for being with us.
Oh, this was a lot of fun, Calli.
Very good education for myself and anybody who's watching. I'd like to kind of narrow in a little bit and talk about Lyme's disease a little bit more, and sort of the risk that it poses to our pets and to us as humans. So during what time, when a tick bites either myself or my dog, is it going to give me Lyme's disease if
Right.
it has it?
Yeah. Again, ticks are amazing critters because they seem so adapted to transmitting diseases. The Lyme disease itself, normally if you're thinking of an insect, and ticks aren't insects, more closely related to spiders. With insects, diseases are transmitted because the organisms lodge in the salivary glands of the insect. But within the tick, particularly with Lyme disease, the organisms are harbored in the gut. Okay, and so they're not digested, they're just present, but they're there at a very low abundance. And so when the tick starts to feed, it's not transmitting.
Not right at the time of bite.
Right.
That's not when it happens.
So what happens is, as it takes in blood, the actual feeding stimulates the bacteria, which of course can replicate every 20 minutes, to get going. And so about 24 hours after the feeding starts, you have a risk of, because as the blood comes in, it means that in the case of the way the tick feeds, some of it goes back out again.
Okay.
And so the bacteria start to be transmitted to the host after about 24 to 48 hours.
Interesting.
So one of our recommendations for people who are active and outdoors is to do a tick check. And if you can catch the tick within 24 hours, then you have very little chance of getting the disease. Yeah.
Okay.
But you have to catch that tick in the 24 hours. So you have to be really diligent.
Right.
And changing behavior is extremely difficult. I know this because I talk about it. I go out, I come back home, 2 days later, I go, oh, tick check. What have I done?
You forgot it.
Yeah. What's that?
Fair enough. Yeah.
So, but if you are diligent and you do catch it, then pull it off. Use sharp fingernails. Use a pair of forceps or something. Grab it really close to the skin. Gently pull it out, and sort of, it's like, lifting the hair on your skin. If it causes a little tent in your on your body, just hold it like that, because it's really easy to, oh my God, it's on me, and then you pull it, and then you leave the head in your hand, which isn't going to transmit the disease, but it's sort of, might as well get the whole thing all at once.
Yeah, it's going to give you a little foreign body reaction, right?
Yeah. And it's like a splinter, but it's not really dangerous. But.
So for us, if I'm out in the bush walking my dog, I want to make sure, obviously, I think that I probably wear some protective clothing that would make it harder for any tick to attach to me. And then when I get home, as you said, remembering to do that tick check.
Yep.
Obviously with our companions, like our dogs that walk with us, not a lot in the way of protective clothing.
No.
I don't think that's overly realistic. I
guess you could shave your dog.
And some people do. I know clients that keep the coat as short as possible in the summer months to try and find the ticks easier.
Yep.
But I think that really puts emphasis on the second part of this, which is for our canine companions, we really need to make sure we do that check when we get home, right? To try and find the tick before that. Yeah. I guess the other important thing to draw attention to here is also to probably anyone out there, any of our viewers out there who are active individuals with their animals, probably also want to discuss that with their veterinarian in terms of tick preventatives that they could use for their pets. I
understand there's some really, I would call them systemics.
Right, correct.
You give to the your pet, and then you poison your tick.
Right, at the time of feeding.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
And what you mentioned about clothing, I was at a workshop once where we had I don't know, I guess a communications expert who was a bit of a fashion queen.
Okay.
And in one of our breakout groups, we were discussing this very thing, and I, did the usual thing, wear light colored clothing, tuck your pants into your socks and all of that. And her response was something like, you're not going to catch me tucking. I'm not going to look like a nerd. It's like, you're out in the bush. Like, who's going to even judge you for what you look like? Just protect yourself.
Right. So we're not going to see it maybe on the catwalks at the New York Fashion Week, but we're going to be safe.
Thickwear.
Yeah, I think we could get that started for sure moving forward. Ken, in thinking about the future, are there any specific concerns that you have about either new types of ticks moving into the area that could cause either human risk or animal risk?
Well, this reminds me of an interesting story about me.
Okay.
Because primarily I spent my life as an aquatic entomologist. So when mosquitoes were introduced into North America, which was a surprise, that had West Nile virus, and then there were other mosquitoes present here that could pick up the virus and transmit it to people. That was pretty well the first time we had a major medical concern as far. And when I started this career of mine in '68, I wanted to be a medical entomologist. But as I said, I wound up an aquatic entomologist. But the aquatic entomology led me to deal with the West Nile problem, and then the tick problem, which was like I had not seen this one coming. In the end, I'm a medical entomologist. And it's like you just wait long enough and you wish for something, and then it happens.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but as far as emerging diseases, because that's what they're called, this Lyme disease is an emerging disease. There are all sorts of things around the world that, there's Zika virus that probably mutated and then has caused incredible problems for pregnant women. Just amazing. And that's only within the last decade. And
so really hard to say, right?
It is. I would say it's impossible to say. But we do have in Canada the National Microbiology Lab. I have a friend there who's really interested in emerging diseases. So when we send him ticks, and it's not just the black-legged tick, we do have some other ticks here that are really infrequent. But he's interested in anything other than the wood tick, which he gets lots of. So he can look and see what sorts of things are present other than just Lyme disease.
Going back to the Lyme disease for a second, and in talking about emergent diseases, I guess part of the Canadian lab's reason for study would also be if there were ways to prevent those diseases, right, in the area.
Yeah.
And anyone who's a viewer of ours who has a dog may be aware that there is a Lyme disease vaccine for dogs. Is there a Lyme disease vaccine for people?
There was once, but we are long-lived, and it turned out that the vaccine caused perhaps as many problems as Lyme did.
Okay.
In the long run.
Okay.
So there isn't right now.
There isn't.
I'm sure. Well, I don't know if pharmaceuticals would or the pharmaceutical firms would be looking for it. They should be, I suppose, but it would be a difficult one to put on the market.
Okay.
Okay. So I think it would be it's probably going to be very important. I mean, right now, in the United States, they estimate that there are about 300,000 people who get Lyme disease per year.
Wow.
That's
not a small number.
It's not a small number. They reckon 9 million people over the last 15 years.
Wow.
And it's the invisible disease.
Right.
Because, the symptoms are so, I must have a summer cold, my muscles ache. One of the things, it's a gift if you have the bullseye rash wherever you get the bite. It's the body's reaction to the saliva, to the fluid from the tick. But that's only in 50, maybe up to 80% of the people who are exposed. If you don't have that, then the rest of the symptoms are like a cold, achy muscles. I feel tired.
So they can easily be
So
disguised as a different disease
If you don't find the
process.
tick, then
Right.
you don't know that you
have been exposed.
have Lyme. Yeah.
Okay.
Another gift is if you have Bell's palsy, where half your face is paralyzed. Not much of a gift, but it's a symptom that.
Oh, a more recognizable symptom to identify the disease process.
Yeah.
Okay. What else can people do in terms of if they've found a tick on themselves or their pet, bring it into somebody to identify it?
Yeah, bring
correct?
it into the health
to
unit.
the health unit.
Yeah.
Okay, and they'll identify it. If they identify it as a deer tick, it will be tested for Lyme's disease.
But what we say here is all you have to do is know that it's a deer tick. If you were actually bitten, then you should convince your doctor that I hate the idea of taking antibiotics indiscriminately, but if you show any sign of a symptom, then you should do your antibiotics right away. Don't wait for blood tests. Don't just encourage your doctor to do this little thing for you.
Okay.
Because it's very easily treated in the early stage with doxycycline. Some of the strains of the bacteria are a little more resistant, so doxycycline, amoxicillin, and for a couple of weeks, and then you should be okay. But if you don't want to take the antibiotics, then you can wait for blood tests. And what happens is your body will develop an antibody which indicates that you have been exposed to this particular, the antigen from the bacteria.
So at the end of the day, early detection and early treatment is probably your best answer to combating the disease.
Yep. And as a vet, do you have anything that you treat your pets with if they are suspected to have Lyme disease?
Yeah, so if we identify an animal who has symptoms of the disease, we also have a little bit of a more quicker, rapid testing process that we can test and find out confirmatively very quickly, yes or no. But it's the same antibiotic. Usually the first antibiotic of choice is a treatment of doxycycline.
Yeah.
And as long as identified early and treated completely, those animals will do really well. They'll survive. It's the ones that we don't detect quickly enough or early enough that can have very serious damage, permanent damage to their bodies.
Yep.
And those are the animals that are much more likely to succumb to the disease process. Yeah.
So
Tough
early
one.
detection.
That's what it's all about.
And really good recovery.
And good prevention, right, to start.
Yep.
Well, Ken, I want to thank you very much for your time and your expertise. And if you ever have any more updates for us, please don't hesitate to come on and share that information. We'd love to have you.
Okay, it's been a pleasure.
Okay. Thanks again to Dr. Ken Deacon for joining us today. My name is Dr. Calli Thompson, and I'd like to thank you for joining us on Let's Bark About It.